Hello, everybody. This is Kristen Lynch, and I'm here with Keith Jennings with Jennings and Associates Financial Advisors. And of course, we wanted to talk to you today and just bring some awareness to what is happening in the stock market. And obviously, as people have questions, we want to make sure we're providing information and helpful tips to go along. So, Keith, what do you think when people talk to you about markets moving in such a volatile way? What's your number one go-to as to what we should be doing?
Yeah, well, I kind of speak to that two fronts. As a client, as someone like everybody that watches the video, is that you have money. What are you doing with it? I think the first thing that can create a real mistake is just overreacting.
Right.
Trying to do things, whether you're trying to be too opportunistic or take action too quickly without a plan. As it relates to the fronts we were talking about before we started the video, is I think we sound like a broken record because it's so fundamental to long-term success is knowing your risk score.
Absolutely. The first thing with what we do for clients when we sit down is talk about risk score and how comfortable and what that supports in the plan. And risk score tends to be the go back to, is to understanding that and make sure it's comfortable.
Well, I think a lot of investors get pressured by the media to have a high risk score because they assume that their neighbor is really killing it in the stock market. No evidence of that.
Right.
Most retirees today in America have not fared very well. And a large part of that is that they haven't used tools like buckets. Right. They really have no idea what the risk score is. So when they go out or they're on social media, everybody is panicking, and it's easy to get caught up in that hysteria. So I think it's really critical to understand, if you want to have uncommon wealth, you really can't do what everybody else does. And that requires you to take a moment to assess and say, do I know my risk number? Right. For starters? And going back to that brokered record story, is one being low risk, and the way we measure risk and the tools we use, 100 being high risk. It's going to create more anxiety naturally for folks that have a high risk number in a period like this, because high risk numbers just generally produce higher volatility. And when the market's losing 4 or 5% for whatever reason it is,
right,
you're going to see a decline in your balances. Lower risk scores are going by that same measure to produce lower volatility, and you're going to see losses that are less. Now, that doesn't mean no loss. Right. I think some people assume that lower risk numbers mean no loss, and that's simply not true. If you have exposure to stocks or mutual funds or real estate, anything that is not generally treasury, CDs, or cash, you're going to see volatility in prices. So understanding the difference between low and no is a real fundamental consideration you need to have when you're assessing your risk number.
Yeah, and you mentioned buckets. I think buckets are the second thing that come up the most, and we talk about understanding the risk score as it relates to their buckets of safety and then the protection piece and growth pieces. Talk a little bit about how important the buckets can be for this strategy.
Sure. I think for anxiety management, buckets are absolute. So if you're an institutional investor, which you hear on the news, they'll have somebody talk about, pontificate about what the economy is going to do or what the stock market's going to do. As it relates to Wall Street, if you narrow that down to Main Street, I rarely hear those economic experts talk about the importance of buckets. And the reason is because they're not really talking to a retiree today that might live in Calvert City or in Marion, Illinois. They're talking to institutional money managers. So I think it's important to delineate why they don't bring these topics up. And largely because they don't care. They just don't care. We do care, and I think if it is no fun to have money and be anxious about it.
Right.
And the key component of that is, if you have bucket one, the safe money bucket that we talk about all the time, you can generally start thinking about that in organizing that by months that you have available to produce income for you and your household. So, if it costs you $5,000 a month to live, you can assess and say, okay, it's $60,000 it's going to have for a year, and maybe now I've got 180,000 bucket one. Is that a lot or a little? If you've got 3 years of money stashed back in bucket one, that's awesome.
That's significant.
And for a lot of the retirees that we work with, they have just that.
Yes.
Now, does everybody? They have 3 years, that is. And that could be expression of if you have $20,000 a month income, you've got a lot more in bucket one.
Right.
And that should give you a lot of really kind of anxiety management. It's better than Xanax. But I think the next kind of lens I look at that too is to say, you should be proud of that. You built this, this fortress moat around financial disaster. And that's the action I'd be taking first. I think people think, oh, what should I be buying? Should I be selling? I think you should be always, whether the market's good or bad, is building a financial moat around your home, your financial home, that is.
And a lot of times we talk about buckets in terms of just understanding that you have them and reminding folks that how much is in each bucket, that they can feel comfortable in that, and we're here to help and remind them that when times like this happen, it's good to just come back to those basics.
For sure.
It's easy to get out of control with what's going on in the news or what your neighbor's doing or the guy at work. But it's really important to remember that you have a plan for a reason, and we're here to help remind you of what that plan is and why we set that up, and that these things would happen.
For sure.
We expect it.
I would. My parting comment would be to say, if you feel anxious, I think the most important part of having a good financial partner or advisor is to reach out to them, to let them be a partner in your anxiety, to talk through your buckets or your plan. I think if your advisor isn't communicating with you, so if you're someone that's not a client of Jennings Associates watching this video, I think if you're not hearing from your advisor, if you don't know if you have buckets, you don't know your risk score, I tell you flat out, it's like find another advisor, find someone that can help you reduce your anxiety in a period like this. And if you are a client of ours and you feel anxious, please don't bear that by yourself. Call out. We're here. And if you haven't already heard from your advisor, which I anticipate you will, we're here for you, and we hope you reach out during this period.
Absolutely. So as we close this, if you have any additional questions, if you'd like to know more about risk score, buckets, or we can help in any way, just let us know. Have a great day.